All right, I'm going to do a carb clean on a Honda 500. This carburetor is off the four-wheeler at this time. You can rebuild it when it's off the four-wheeler. I don't like to clean the carb and rebuild the carb when it's still attached to the four-wheeler. A lot of times you can undo these clamps that sit right here when it's on the four-wheeler. You can pivot your carburetor one way or the other, but you just can't get in there and get a good clean when you're doing that. So, got the carburetor off. I've showed you in a separate video how to remove cables out of here. We've got the choke cable off at this time as well. We've got a throttle position sensor here. We've got your fuel inlet is here, so your fuel goes in here. This is directly goes to your fuel tank or your fuel petcock there, and that fuel runs down into your bottom bowl area. You give it gas, your slide goes up, your butterfly goes open. Fuel is sucked up through the bottom bowl here, through that main jet, and fuel is then pushed into your cylinder and it explodes when it's in your cylinder. So that is kind of just a brief overview of the carburetor on this model. We've got your idle adjust on this side. Turn it clockwise to raise your idle up, turn it counterclockwise to lower it. And what you're doing when you are adjusting your idle is simply this. You're opening your butterfly a little bit more. Obviously, when you adjust your idle, it's going to be ever so slightly. You're not hardly going to be able to see this butterfly open when you do, like, say, one turn out. We've got a cold start sensor here, or a heater here. You want to make sure that that wire is attached and in good condition. Make sure it's not worn through at all. We've got also on this model, which is kind of handy, a plunger here. So when you push this, you are actually pushing fuel through this nipple here, and then it's forced into the cylinder there. Again, exploding, helping your four-wheeler to start. So that is what this knob down on the bottom is. You also have that choke like I talked about earlier. That's supposed to help it start as well. So I'm going to go ahead and rebuild this carburetor, and I'll walk you through that process. Okay, you can remove this switch here. It's a 12mm bolt. You don't necessarily have to clean the carburetor. Now we've got a drain on the bottom of your bowl here. That's going to be at the end of the year if you're wanting to drain that fuel out of that carburetor. You can do that just by doing a couple turns out on that screw there. That fuel will start dumping out this bottom nipple here. You do want to make sure that you've got a hose on the bottom nipple here so that your fuel doesn't dump directly onto your motor. And also when your four-wheeler's bouncing around on a trailer, on the back of a pickup, or if it's just sitting there in the shop leaking fuel, you want that fuel to dump out this nipple here and through your vent hose or through your fuel line that dumps to the bottom underneath of the four-wheeler so that that fuel isn't dumping directly on your motor. One more thing, your air fuel screw is here. This model, they make it a little bit of a tricky adjustment there. You've got to actually have a special tool to adjust that, and they do that because they don't want people adjusting those air fuel screws if they don't know what they're doing there. So it can cause a real serious issue if your four-wheeler is running too lean or too rich, and a lot of times people adjust that not knowing what to do there. So 4 Phillips screws on the bottom here. All right, we've got the 4 Phillips screws off. I'm going to go ahead and pull those aside here. And we're going to lift up, and there is our bowl assembly here. You can see we've got debris down in there. This four-wheeler ran really, really well, so I'm a little bit surprised to see that kind of debris. Take carbon choke cleaner, you can spray this bottom bowl out here, and then take compressed air and you can blow through there, make sure and clean it up really well, make sure there's no debris sitting down there, make sure there's nothing gummed up that you can scrape off with a screwdriver. Make sure this O-ring is in good condition. Here's your overflow tube there, like I was talking earlier. Your fuel sloshing around in your carburetor, it's going to go down this tube here, and then it'll dump out this bottom nipple. So if you take and blow through this bottom, if you take and blow through this bottom tab here, you'll see my carbon choke cleaner coming out this bottom nipple here. So that is how that works. We've got our carburetor ready to clean the jets here. We've got a couple flat screwdrivers for areas here for our jets. So you take a screwdriver, unscrew that. Your jet number, the size of your jet, will be written on the top here. So very hard to see. This one's a 162. And then we've got this spacer here. Make sure that goes back the direction that it's supposed to. So it's just like that. Our engine side is on this side here, so we can keep that in mind. We've got another jet here we can remove. So we've got our pin running through here. It is grooved on this side, and this is how this was put back together. So I'm not saying 100% that yours is going to be this way, but we have some splines here that'll hold that pin from sliding back and forth. You want to make sure you go out that direction. I use a small pick. Very, very carefully take a small screwdriver, tap on it, and it pushed it out this direction. Had I tried to go the other way, it could have potentially broke these posts off, so keep that in mind. Pull our pin there. I'm going to pull your needle up, or your float up there. Your needle is going to come with it. So that is your needle. Inspect this rubber tip area especially. They become grooved, worn, destroyed. Sometimes debris will sit down in here because remember when I said your fuel comes directly from this tab here, runs through your carburetor, out this port here. So this is your seat, this is your needle. This is unfortunately not a replaceable seat on this model, but you can replace your needle. If you've got fuel bouncing around, constantly leaking, you potentially have an issue with your needle here, so inspect that really well. Also inspect your float here for any cracks or debris or breaks. You want to make sure that that is not getting filled up with fuel inside there, causing a false reading on your float. So we've got our pilot jet here, and this pilot jet is written on the top here. It's a 45, just right above the threads on this model. So it's a 45. Again, you want to make sure that you take compressed air, blow it out, make sure you can see through it, and make sure that that jet is in good condition. Next, we've got a jet coming in from the side here. We've got a rubber tip on the top here, and we can actually pull this just to make sure that it's clean underneath of there. And then we've got a jet here. This is a very small jet, so you want to make sure you don't lose this one. And it's a little bit of a difficult spot to put a jet, so you're not going to be able to see me pulling it out. But all you do is take, and it just drops out just like that. Numbers on this are up top. This is a 60, so this is a 60 jet that comes in from the side there. And what that does is allow fuel that's in your float area here, or your bottom bowl area, to run up through here. This rubber cap keeps it from falling, the fuel falling back down, and it shoots that fuel up into your top of your carburetor there. Not the top, but where your air is coming through. Take carbon choke cleaner then. All right, we have got a main jet holder here. We're going to take, it's a 7mm wrench. We can take and pull that out. You want to make sure that this is all clean. Make sure there's no debris in there. And you can see there that our needle slides down. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the video, but if we slide this slide up, you'll see here that that needle goes up. So same exact slide and needle runs all the way down into your bottom end here, bottom of your carburetor. So you do want to make sure that these ports are cleaned out. Make sure this jet is completely cleaned out, or your main jet holder there. And you can actually take now, and where your needle slides into, you can take and push this. There's a orifice here that your slide and needle run down into. Instead of your carburetor, you can actually push that out the bottom there. So this actually holds that brass piece in. So you want to make sure that that's in good condition. Spray it out with carbon choke cleaner before you put it back together. Next, what I'm going to do is pull your bottom or your top cap off here, get into our diaphragm area. So what I do is take my thumb, put it on top here, and hold it in. And I take my other hand and start unscrewing these 4 Phillips screws. All right now we are got the screws loose. We're going to go ahead and remove those. I want to show you a couple things on these screws. This side here has the cable holder, the hose holder here. So it's got, and then this side also has one that slides through. So we're actually going to keep this one attached to the hose there. We're just going to pull the screw out so it doesn't get lost. and that cable holder might, or that hose holder might just slide off there anyways. Okay, and then we got the same thing on this side. Still keeping our thumb on top of this cap here. It is spring loaded. It's not gonna come off of there and poke an eye out or anything, but there is gonna be a little bit of pressure there. We're gonna take now, pull that cap up. The reason why I kept my finger on the top there is because I didn't want this diaphragm to be put in a position that was gonna rip. So we've got the cap off of there. We've got our spring off of there. And you can see a lot of coils on this spring, but not a lot of tension. So we can take now, use our other finger, push this diaphragm up. Being careful to do that, as you can see there, this diaphragm sticks. Now we'll slide that up. There's that needle that we saw clear down in the bottom end, our slide there. And you can take a Phillips screwdriver, stick it down there, do about 1/8 of a turn there, and pull this plastic cap off of there. Now grab a small, now I grab small pliers. We'll reach down in there, grab that cap, and I want to show you what's underneath of there. There's your cap there. It's got a spring underneath there, so make sure that is staying in there. And then we've got our needle. Now this needle is adjustable, so pay attention where it's at if you're going to take it apart. There it is there. You know what? It's not adjustable, but it's got a circlip there that can pop on and off. We also have a small washer underneath of there, so make sure that that goes in the correct position. It's a small washer, but it also acts as a spacer. So I said those needles, this needle wasn't adjustable, but you can adjust the height with a spacer in there, so keep that in mind. In your book or manual should tell you what that's going to be. That or the aftermarket parts that you have on there. Say you have an aftermarket exhaust, they're going to tell you what needle height that needs to be. Also, they may just include a different needle, a different size needle with your exhaust or your intake, whatever you're doing to your four-wheeler. So that's the top side there. Going back together then, we can just drop this down in there. Make sure it kind of sits down where it needs to be in the groove there. You can take, and now what you got to do is just spin it. And once it's about 1/8 of a turn again, you want to take, and you should be able to push that needle up, and it should spring back down. So that'll be a test to make sure that that spring is in the right position. And again, that's about 1/8 of a turn. Now what I like to do is take compressed air and carbon choke cleaner, blow this all out, make sure it's all clean, make sure that slide can go up and down freely, make sure that this slide is clean, make sure your needle's clean there, not damaged at all. Now I like to take my finger then, turning this diaphragm all the way down like that, find the spot where your needle is supposed to go. And there's a tab here on your diaphragm. Make sure that that's lined up with the tab on your carburetor, which is here. Slide that needle down, make sure that that needle seats properly. Now I like to take my finger with your diaphragm in the position that I showed you there. Make sure that that slide doesn't slide down any farther than your finger. So I got about 1 inch in between the bottom of that carburetor venturi and the slide there. Now you take the spring, set it on top there. And the reason why I put my finger on there is because if I were to take and push this down, that diaphragm there would pull itself off of the groove that it's in. You want to make sure it's in the right groove. So we've got a tab right here on your top cap. Make sure that that's seated where it needs to be. And you got to work around these vent lines. You can pull those vent lines. All right, so we've got that still having our finger underneath of there. We've got all kinds of hose. Let's see, this one goes here, if I remember right, so I'm going to set that. All right, we've got this kind of the larger hole one, goes on this side. Slide that underneath of there. Keeping pressure on that top cap there so that diaphragm doesn't slide out of place. When you have two screws there kind of across from each other in place, a lot of times you can take your finger off that top cap. I'm gonna flip that upside down. We're gonna put the bottom of the carburetor back together. We've got our main jet holder that we need to make sure is snug. Again, 7mm. We've got our pilot jet. We'll slide down in there, make sure that that port is all cleaned out. We've got our secondary main jet, that I'm going to make very difficult for you to see, but it's a little bit hard to hold that at an angle and get that screwed in there. So once you get a thread or two going, you can take your fingers off of there, snug that up. We'll go ahead and snug our pilot jet up. Pilot jet is used when starting your four-wheeler, so if you, rubber cap on the top, if you have a hard time starting your four-wheeler, more than likely it is because of a pilot jet issue. So it may be dirty, maybe plugged, might not be cleaned out. We've got your main jet there. We're going to screw that on there, snug that up. We've got your needle there, slide that down. Again, we've got our engine side facing us for the carburetor, so we're going to slide this pin in this direction there. I take then my screwdriver, just a little tap there. Do not tap hard on that thing. And then we've got our plastic spacer there. Slide that down that way. The reason why you do that is because you put this bottom bowl on here, and this your overflow tube here needs to slide down this tab there. So then you can slide that around. You just carefully set that on there, and you can hold it a little bit sideways and look. One thing you do want to make sure that this gasket stays in there. Sometimes what I do is I'll take just a tiny bit of grease. You want to make sure that grease doesn't get inside your carburetor, but a tiny bit of grease, and put it on there just enough to hold it. And I'm actually just going to tip our carburetor so it doesn't come off at this time. And it's a little bit of a wrestling match to get it around that plastic spacer, get that O-ring where it needs to be, and then set on there. And you'll feel it go on there. There's a groove that sets down into, and then you can take your 4 Phillips screws there and make sure it's pushed down or set down into that groove. If you're really having to force it down, then you're probably not in that groove, or your O-ring's not in that groove. So then go ahead and snug those up. I did want to show you one more thing on here. Our diaphragm that's down here, I just want to show you this quick. This again is spring loaded. We've got 2 screws holding this on. I like to kind of keep my fingers over it. It's not going to go flying anywhere, but there is a little bit of pressure on here. Make sure they're completely out. Pay attention to the order that your spring goes in there. Well, I guess on this one you can't switch the spring around, but your spring gets set down in here. There's your diaphragm there. If you push on that, it'll scoot it out. Be careful doing that so you don't rip that gasket, but that at least shows you can move it. You can see there how it works. Going back together then, I don't think that it matters. It does too matter. It goes this direction. I don't know how you're going to see that in the video, but this is off-centered here, so keep that in mind. And make sure your spring's lined up there with your diaphragm. Push on that. This diaphragm is so small, these a lot of times won't rip or have any issues, but it's good to get down in there, make sure it's clean, make sure that spring's in there properly. Again, if you have liked this video, please like and subscribe. Please share this if you found it helpful. Comment below if you've got questions on this four-wheeler. Again, we're going through and rebuilding it. We've done a valve adjustment. We've done overview service work on this machine. So check out those videos on my channel. Please subscribe and like. Thanks for watching.